Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I wanted to talk about what you should look for when buying a used Subaru Impreza WRX STI. So in today's topic, I kind of wanted to help you guys out because I did get a few questions asked, like to me personally, just because I own one. A lot of people ask me, are they reliable? Or like, what should I look for when I'm buying a used one? Particularly, they ask about like the used market, because for like the new, it's kind of like common sense. You kind of just have that warranty in place for that. So I kind of wrote down a few things here just so I don't forget. So the first thing you want to do before you even think about going to look at one of these, is do your research first, and that's pretty basic research. You kind of want to just look at, okay, is this car that I'm potentially looking at, is it coming from like a private seller, or is it coming from like a dealership? And the reason why that's important is because it kind of depends on like where you're gonna get the car, because like typically like the private sellers, they kind of, just for like this, my opinion, like I said, when you're looking at a private seller, they typically don't want you to like check out their car that much, obviously they'll give you some details, but like from a private seller standpoint, they kind of don't want you to, like jack up the car, or, taking a look at it, in depth, because, as a private seller, there's going to be a lot of people that, that would come and take a look at the vehicle. So my guess is, it really depends. And for the private seller, and you got to take a look at like how they see it, because if they have a lot of potential buyers, there's going to be a lot of people that wants to test drive, or take a look at the car. So that's just a lot of people to go through. And as a private seller, it's kind of like it's kind of that situation where like if they allow you to do it, go ahead. If they don't, then that's why I'm saying like it depends on where it's coming from. And as for the dealership, it's much easier because it's kind of like they already have the Carfax. Like typically they have a Carfax, on their website, if they have one, and a lot of dealerships they do that. So for the dealership, I would say, look at the images that they provide. Instead of going out and actually taking a look at the car right away, I would say, like I said, do your research, do your due diligence before even going out. That way it doesn't waste anybody's time, your time, the dealership's time. Because I'm sure they have videos or images on the website. So take a look at that, look at it thoroughly. Make sure if it's stock or modified, how many miles, what year, how many owners. That really matters, especially because one of these cars, like an STI, WRX, when they become used, they tend to be modified and they tend to be, beat up a little bit. So you really want to take a look at that. And like I said, it really depends. And the reason why I'm saying that is because a dealership, you can request, a couple things, to check out the vehicle, as in terms of like, a compression test or a leak down test. It really depends. I would want to ask your dealership. And the reason why that's important as well, coming from a dealership standpoint, is just from my experience, I'm just saying this because of the way when I was looking at one of these cars, and the dealership, it really depends on places, but I'm saying like at least 90% of the dealerships, like, they allow you to take off any modifications when they do a trade-in. So when they're taking in a trade-in, they typically allow anybody that owned the car previously, they allow them to like take off any modifications that's been done to it. So, and it's still going to be the same trade-in value. So, but what I mean by that is when you take off an intake or like an exhaust and you put the stock one back on, they're still gonna pay you the same amount if you were doing the trade-in. So a lot of owners tend to take off whatever they can, and then do the trade-in and then sell the aftermarket parts. So that's very important. That's why I'm telling you, if you're taking a look at a vehicle at a dealership, most of the time it's been modded. It's just they took off the aftermarket parts and put on the stock parts, and then they traded in their vehicle, and that goes with the cob access port. A lot of these owners, a lot of these Subaru owners, they have a cob access port on their car previously, and they just unmarried it, and then they sold it, at Facebook Marketplace, Craigslist, whatever the case may be. That's what they did to the vehicle, and that's why I'm saying it's very important to ask as many questions as you can. And this goes into my next topic, or the next topic I want to get into. In terms of the vehicle, when you do all your research first and you're actually going to take a look at the car, the first thing I would do is turn on the car. Just let it run for a little bit and make sure it's actually running healthy. By what I mean by that is when the car is idling, make sure that it's idling correctly, because you just gotta make sure the car is running healthy, because you can tell when the motor is trying to die out, it's struggling to idle. There's a lot of transmission noises going on. That's when you know for a fact, okay, don't buy the car, because you're going to buy the car, and when you buy these cars and let's say they do have a little bit of problems, it's not going to be a little problem. It's going to be a gigantic problem and financial stress on yourself, or your partner, or whoever the case may be. So don't buy the car if it doesn't even run good on idle. So start the car, let it run for a little bit, and make sure it gets to operator temp, or operation temp, or whatever you want to call it. Make sure it's running, and like I said, check out the transmission noises. If it has transmission noises, don't buy it, because you don't want transmission problems, especially with the WRXs. They have a lot of transmission problems, so don't buy one. Seriously, don't even buy it, because there's a lot of other cars you can take a look at, and you can buy those cars. In terms of like WRXs and STIs, very important. And make sure. So once that's done, if it's running correctly, I would say turn the car back off, and then turn it back on. So the reason why I'm saying that is because you want to test how good the car actually is, how it performs when you're turning off the car, turning it back on, turning it off, turning it back on. It's kind of testing the car. Okay, is it struggling to turn it back on, or you might even get a check engine light that comes on. So you want to reset the system and restart it, and that's very important, because you might not see that when you first initially started up the car, because when you started up the car, you might be like, okay, it started up fine, it's good to go, it's idling correctly, you're like, okay, I'm good to go. But you want to go ahead and redo the process, making sure that it's actually doing what it's supposed to be doing, and there's no check engine light. Because I've come across used WRXs where you turn off the car and you turn it back on, and then the check engine light comes on, and that's not good. So make sure you do that a couple times, like 3 or 4 times, just so that checks out, nothing funny is going on. And if those two checks out, I would, like I said, and during the first time when you're letting it idle, you want to check for misfires, because with these vehicles, you don't want to deal with any type of misfires, because if it misfires, then you're going to have a lot of problems, and you're going to be chasing, and you don't want to do any of that, right? Because you want to buy a car to have fun with it, not to have issues and then, be financially in trouble. So if that checks out, you want to, check the engine bay. Make sure that the engine bay has no weird things going on, like no loose tubing, no loose components. You want to check, if everything is seated correctly, in terms of like the intake, the top mount. You really want to check for anything that's out of the ordinary, anything out of the, just laying here, or any tubings that's not seated correctly. You want to make sure everything is seated correctly, nice and tight, because with these cars, it's turbocharged. Very important not to have a boost leak or a vacuum leak. That's going to cause a lot of problems. So I recommend, I know a lot of people don't even say this, I recommend bringing like a flashlight. That way you can check the coolant, you could check your fluids, you check your oil, you check around the engine bay to make sure there's no residue, no leaks whatsoever. That's very important. Just take your time, do your due diligence, because that's going to save you thousands and thousands of money going down the road and going ahead and rebuilding one of these. Because You don't want to deal with that. So yeah, go through that. Make a checklist if you want to. Check, do your research, check everything. Like check everything out. Make a list if you have to. If you don't want to forget. And that's if that checks out, there's a lot of things you gotta check. You gotta look out for. So if that checks out, what you want to do is you want to go for this is when you go for a test drive because you want to check everything out before you go on a test drive. In terms of like the exterior, I'm not really concerned with the exterior because that's pretty common sense. You just do a quick walk around, making sure there's no rust or the fender liner. You see how the fender liner is missing. Exhaust is hanging. I mean, it's pretty common sense. The wheels, the tires good, the wheels are good, no scrapes. I mean, that I'm not really concerned about that. It's more about the engine health is what I'm concerned. So then that's when you go on a test drive. So when you go on a test drive, it's very important to try not to listen to so much about like having fun, because a lot of people mistake these vehicles is when they buy one, they want to have fun with the car right away. So they kind of ignore the noises that they want to listen to. So that's one of the most important thing too. You want to make sure that you're hearing the right noises in the correct part of the test drive. By what I mean by that is try not to listen to exhaust or any intake noises, because that's for excitement. You want to listen for transmission noises, any gear noises. Um, so you want to do that. So once you're going on a test drive, you want to listen for any kind of weird noises, like any kind of like when you go on a bump or something like that. Or for me, I recommend you go into like a tunnel or like near like a drive-through, because you can kind of hear noises that you typically wouldn't hear just like normally test driving it. Like an open road, you can't really hear anything because you can't really hear any echoes. So you want to go to like what I'm saying is you want to go to like a confined space. That way you can actually hear any exterior noises that is kind of weird, and you're like, okay, this is questionable. Because once it's questionable, you're like, yeah, this is for sure. I'm not gonna buy this vehicle, because it's like, once it's that in of itself is already a red flag. So don't do that. And like I said, listen for any misfiring too, because misfiring could happen when you're on throttle. So you really, really have to pay attention on the misfires. That's why I'm kind of like making sure that that you're aware of this, because a lot of people don't talk about this. I don't even see much videos on like Subarus and what issues they have when they're looking at a used one, because a lot of people have issues when they're buying secondhand, and they have just a lot of problems, and then it doesn't go addressed. And a lot of people post on group pages, forums, and all that stuff. So when you're test driving the car, try to beat on it a little, because you don't ever notice until you like see the car at all, like if you see the car at all levels, like when it's going 20 miles an hour, when it's going 50 miles an hour, when it's going 70 miles an hour. And the reason why I'm saying that is because if you're driving at 70 miles an hour and it misfires, that's going to be an issue, because you only notice it at 70 miles an hour. Or if it only grinds at a specific RPM, you want to take a note of that, because you don't want to buy a vehicle and it already having transmission problems, the fluid's bad. You really don't want to do that. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Do your due diligence. Check out the car thoroughly, exterior, interior, motor wise, because that's very important. And the last thing I want to touch upon is find a car, a Subaru WRX STI, that is as stock as possible. Because if you don't buy this car stock, you're gonna have a lot of problems, because you don't know if it's been tuned. You don't know what's been done to it. So I say, if you do buy one that's modified, tune it as soon as possible. And that's what I did. I tuned this car as soon as I got the car, just because you never know what's been going on with the vehicle. Tune it ASAP. Get it pro tuned. I don't care what anybody says. Get the car pro tuned. Don't use an off the shelf tune. I mean, you can, but that's on you. Just my personal preference. I would not use one. Yeah. So I hope you guys take away anything important from the video. Comment below if you want to ask any questions. I'll try to answer it. And this is just from my personal experience. So yeah, stay tuned. Don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel. More plans for this car and more plans for the channel. Yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one. See ya.